The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt as Clara stood in the alley behind the diner, her hands trembling around the straps of her backpack. At 15, she was too young to feel this old, too small to carry the weight of her mother's words still ringing in her ears. "You're no daughter of mine." The memory stung like a fresh wound, raw and unhealed. She'd been kicked out, her belongings stuffed into a single bag. The door of her childhood home slammed shut behind her. Her mother, Ellen, had always been cold, but this was a betrayal Clara hadn't seen coming. Clara's sneakers scuffed against the cracked pavement as she walked, her breath visible in the chilly evening air. The city of Havenport was unforgiving to those without a place to call home, and Clara was now one of its castaways. She'd always been the quiet one, the dreamer who hid her sketches in notebooks, the girl who believed in second chances. But that belief was crumbling fast. Her mother had called her a burden, a mistake, and those words carved themselves into Clara's heart. She found shelter that night in a community center, where a kind volunteer named Mrs. Larson offered her a cot and a warm meal. The older woman's eyes were gentle, but Clara could see the pity there, and it burned. "You're strong, sweetheart," Mrs. Larson said, her voice soft but firm. "You'll find your way." Clara nodded, but inside, she wasn't sure. Strength felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Days turned into weeks, and Clara learned to survive. She took odd jobs cleaning tables at the diner, sweeping floors at a local bookstore, anything to keep her from starving. The city was a maze of noise and faces, but Clara felt invisible. She kept her head down, her sketches hidden, her dreams locked away. Yet, every night, as she lay on her cot, she thought of her mother. Ellen's face, sharp and unyielding, haunted her. Why hadn't she been enough? What had she done to deserve this? Clara's only solace was her art. In stolen moments, she'd sit in the park, sketching the world around her, the gnarled trees, the laughing children, the weary faces of strangers. Her pencil was her voice, her way of screaming without making a sound. But even that felt fragile, like it could be taken from her at any moment. One afternoon, while sketching in the park, Clara met Jamal, a lanky boy with a quick smile and a knack for fixing things. He was 17, a runaway like her, but his eyes held a spark of hope she envied. "Nice drawing," he said, peering over her shoulder. Clara flinched, protective of her work, but his grin was disarming. They talked for hours, swapping stories of survival. Jamal had been on his own since 13, bouncing between shelters and odd jobs. "You gotta keep moving," he told her. "Don't let the past pin you down." Their friendship became Clara's lifeline. Jamal taught her how to navigate the city's underbelly, where to find free meals, which alleys were safe, how to spot trouble before it found you. In return, Clara shared her sketches, and Jamal's made her feel seen for the first time in months. Together, they dreamed of something better, a place where they weren't defined by what they'd lost. But the past wasn't done with Clara. One evening, as she and Jamal sorted through donated clothes at the community center, Mrs. Larson pulled her aside. "Someone's been asking about you," she said, her voice low. Clara's heart sank. She knew who it was before Mrs. Larson said the name. Ellen. Her mother had tracked her down, not out of love, but because she needed something. Clara's stomach churned. She wasn't ready to face the woman who'd thrown her away. That night, Clara sat on her cot, her sketchbook open to a blank page. Her pencil hovered, but no lines came. The thought of her mother's return was a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. She wanted to believe in redemption, in the idea that people could change. but the scars Ellen had left ran deep. Clara closed her eyes, her fingers tightening around the pencil. She wasn't the same girl who'd been rejected at 15. She was stronger now, wasn't she? But strength, Clara was learning, wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about choosing to stand up, even when every part of you wanted to collapse. As she drifted to sleep, she made a silent vow, whatever her mother wanted, Clara would face it on her own terms. She wouldn't let Ellen break her again. The community center was quieter than usual the next morning. The hum of voices replaced by the soft patter of rain against the windows. Clara sat at a corner table, her sketchbook open but untouched. Her mother's shadow loomed larger now, the news of Ellen's inquiries twisting like a knife in Clara's chest. She hadn't seen her mother in nearly a year, but the pain of that final argument still felt fresh. Ellen's voice, sharp as broken glass, telling her to leave and never come back. Jamal slid into the seat across from her, his usual grin absent. "You okay?" he asked, his dark eyes searching her face. Clara shrugged, unwilling to let the fear spill out. "It's just her," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jamal nodded. He didn't need details to understand. He'd seen enough of the world's cruelty to know what it looked like. Mrs. Larson approached, her expression cautious. "Clara," she called again. She said, "Your mother. She says she wants to meet. Says it's urgent." Clara's hands clenched into fists. Urgent. That word felt like a trap. Ellen had never cared about Clara's needs. Why now? Did she say what she wanted? Clara asked, her voice tight. Mrs. Larson shook her head. "Just that she needs to see you. I told her you'd decide." Clara spent the day wrestling with the decision. Part of her wanted to ignore Ellen, to let her mother stew in whatever mess she'd made. But another part, a smaller, softer part, wondered if this was a chance for answers. Maybe even closure. By evening, she'd made up her mind. She'd meet Ellen, but not as the scared girl she'd been at 15. She'd face her mother as someone who'd learned to survive. The meeting was set for a small cafe on the edge of Havenport, a place with chipped mugs and flickering neon signs. Clara arrived early, her heart pounding as she slid into a booth. When Ellen walked in, Clara barely recognized her. Her mother's once pristine appearance was gone. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, but her eyes still held that familiar sharpness, the kind that could cut through anything. "Clara," Ellen said, sitting down without a smile. "You look different." Clara didn't respond. She waited, her hands steady under the table. Ellen leaned forward, her voice low. "I need your help. I'm in trouble debts. Bad ones. I need you to come home. Help me sort this out." Clara's breath caught. Not an apology, not a word of regret, just a demand. As if Clara owed her anything. "You threw me out," Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "You told me I was nothing. Why should I help you now?" Ellen's face hardened. "Because I'm your mother. Because I gave you everything before you decided to be ungrateful." The words hit like a slap, but Clara didn't flinch. She'd spent too many nights hardening herself against this kind of pain. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't owe you anything," she said, and walked out, her heart racing but her head high. The rain had stopped, and the city felt alive around her, its pulse matching her own. For the first time, Clara felt the weight of her own power, not the power to hurt, but to choose. She chose herself. Back at the community center, Jamal was waiting. "How'd it go?" he asked, tossing her an apple from his bag. Clara caught it, a small smile breaking through. "She wanted me to fix her mistakes," she said. I told her no. Jamal's grin returned, brighter than ever. That's my girl, he said, and Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. But the victory was short-lived. Days later, Ellen showed up at the community center, her face twisted with desperation. You can't just walk away, she hissed, grabbing Clara's arm. I raised you. You owe me. Clara pulled free, her pulse pounding. You abandoned me, she said, her voice low but firm. I don't owe you my life. Ellen's eyes narrowed, but she left without another word. Clara knew it wasn't over. Her mother wasn't the type to give up easily. But for now, she'd won a small battle. She returned to her sketches, pouring her anger and hope into every line. The pages filled with images of strength, women standing tall, cities rising from ashes. Clara was building something new, something her mother could never take away. As weeks passed, Clara and Jamal grew closer, their dreams intertwining. They talked of leaving Havenport, of finding a place where they could start fresh. But the city had other plans. One night, as Clara walked home from the diner, she saw a familiar figure in the shadows. Ellen. And she wasn't alone. The alley was darker than usual, the streetlights flickering like they knew trouble was coming. Clara's heart thudded as she saw her mother standing with a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, his face shadowed by a hood, but his presence screamed danger. Ellen's eyes locked onto Clara's, a mix of desperation and something colder, something calculating. Clara, she called, her voice syrupy sweet, a tone Clara hadn't heard since she was a child. We need to talk. Clara's instincts screamed to run, but her feet stayed rooted. She'd spent a year learning to stand her ground, and she wasn't about to let Ellen scare her now. What do you want? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. The man stepped forward, his face coming into view scarred, with eyes that gleamed like a predator's. Your mom says you're good at fixing things, he said, his voice low and rough. We've got a job for you. Clara's stomach dropped. She glanced at Ellen, who wouldn't meet her eyes. What kind of job? Clara asked, though she already suspected the answer wasn't good. The man smirked. Nothing you can't handle. A little. Delivery. You're young. You blend in. No one will suspect you. Clara's blood ran cold. They were trying to pull her into something illegal, something that could ruin her. She took a step back, her hands tightening around her backpack straps. I'm not doing it, she said, her voice firm. Ellen's face twisted with anger. You ungrateful little, she started. But the man raised a hand, silencing her. Think it over, kid, he said, his tone deceptively calm. You don't want to make things harder than they need to be. He handed her a crumpled piece of paper with an address and a time. Be there tomorrow night, or we'll find you. Clara walked away, her heart pounding so loud she thought it might burst. She didn't look at the paper until she was back at the community center, safe in the dim light of her corner. The address was for a warehouse on the outskirts of Havenport, a place she'd heard whispers about shady deals, dangerous people. She tore the paper into pieces and threw it in the trash, but the weight of the encounter clung to her. She told Jamal everything, her words tumbling out in a rush. His face darkened as she spoke, his usual lightness replaced by a quiet fury. You can't go, he said. They're using you. Your mom's selling you out. Clara nodded, her throat tight. She'd known Ellen was desperate, but this was a new low. What do I do? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Jamal leaned forward, his eyes fierce. We stick together. We figure this out. You're not alone. Clara. His words were a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of panic. They spent the night planning, mapping out ways to avoid the warehouse, to stay out of Ellen's reach. Mrs. Larson overheard and offered her own advice. Lay low, sweetheart, and don't trust anyone who's tied to your mother. The next day, Clara stayed away from the warehouse, but the city felt smaller, more suffocating. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At the diner, her boss noticed her distraction and sent her home early. As she walked through the streets, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, she saw the man from the alley again, leaning against a lamppost, his eyes fixed on her. He didn't approach, but his presence was a warning. That night, Clara barely slept. Her dreams were filled with shadows and her mother's voice, taunting her. When she woke, she found a note slipped under the community center's door, addressed to her in Ellen's handwriting. You can't run forever. The words sent a chill down her spine. She showed the note to Jamal, who crumpled it in his fist. We need to get out of here, he said. Leave Havenport. Start over. The idea was tempting, but Clara wasn't ready to run. Not yet. She'd spent too long rebuilding herself to let Ellen tear her down again. I want to face her, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I need to end this. Jamal looked at her, his expression a mix of worry and admiration. Then we do it together, he said. They spent the next few days preparing, gathering information about Ellen's debts and the people she was involved with. Clara's sketches became a map of her resolve, images of broken chains, of birds taking flight. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the girl she'd been, the one who'd believed in love and family before the world taught her otherwise. Clara's hands shook as she stood outside the warehouse. The address from the torn-up note burned into her memory. She hadn't wanted to come, but Ellen's threats had grown bolder. Notes left at the diner, calls to the community center, whispers from strangers who knew her name. Clara knew running wasn't an option anymore. She had to face her mother, not as a victim, but as someone who'd earned her strength. Jamal stood beside her, his jaw tight. You sure about this? He asked, his voice low. Clara nodded, though her heart was a drumbeat of fear and resolve. I need to know why, she said. Why she keeps coming after me. Jamal squeezed her shoulder, a silent promise that he wouldn't let her face this alone. The warehouse was a hulking shadow against the night sky, its windows dark and broken. Clara pushed open the rusted door, the creak echoing like a warning. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and the faint smell of oil. Ellen stood in the center of the room, flanked by the scarred man from the alley and another figure Clara didn't recognize. Her mother's face was a mask of impatience, but there was something else there, fear. Maybe. Or desperation. You came, Ellen said. Her voice clipped. Good. Let's make this quick. She gestured to a crate behind her, its lid half open, revealing stacks of cash and small plastic bags. Clara's stomach twisted. Drugs. Money. This was the mess Ellen had fallen into, and she wanted Clara to clean it up. I'm not helping you, Clara said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. You abandoned me. You don't get to drag me into this. Ellen's eyes flashed with anger. You think you're better than me. She snapped. You're nothing without me. I made you. The words stung, but Clara didn't flinch. She'd heard them before, and they'd lost their power. The scarred man stepped forward, his presence looming. Enough, he said, his voice a low growl. You do the job, kid, or you don't walk out of here. Jamal moved closer to Clara, his body tense, ready to act. But Clara raised a hand, stopping him. This was her fight. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw a woman broken by her own choices. "You're wrong," Clara said softly. "I'm everything without you. I survived. I built a life. You don't get to take that from me." Ellen's face crumpled, but not with regret, with rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Before Clara could respond, the second man lunged, his hand reaching for her arm. Jamal was faster, shoving him back with a force that surprised even Clara. The scarred man drew a knife, and the warehouse erupted into chaos. Clara ducked, her heart racing as she grabbed a metal pipe from the floor. She didn't want to fight, but she wasn't going down without one. The struggle was brief but brutal. Jamal wrestled the knife away, and Clara swung the pipe, catching the second man in the knee. He crumpled, cursing. Ellen screamed, her voice shrill and panicked. "Stop it. You're ruining everything." But Clara didn't stop. She couldn't. Not until she was free. When the police arrived, tipped off by Mrs. Larson, who'd grown suspicious of Ellen's calls, the warehouse was a mess of overturned crates and shouting. Clara and Jamal stood together, breathless but unharmed. Ellen was handcuffed, her face a mix of defiance and defeat. The scarred man and his accomplice were taken away, their threats silenced. As the police questioned her, Clara felt a strange calm. She'd faced her mother and walked away whole. But the victory was bittersweet. Ellen hadn't apologized, hadn't shown a flicker of love. Clara realized then that closure wasn't about her mother changing, it was about letting go of the hope that she ever would. Back at the community center, Mrs. Larson hugged her tightly. "You did good, sweetheart," she said. Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. She and Jamal sat up late, talking about the future. He wanted to fix cars, maybe open a shop. Clara wanted to draw, to tell stories with her art. For the first time, those dreams didn't feel impossible. But the past wasn't done with her yet. A week later, Clara received a letter from Ellen, written from jail. It was short, venomous. "You'll pay for this. You owe me." Clara stared at the words, then tore the letter in half. She didn't owe Ellen anything. Not anymore. The weeks after the warehouse incident were a blur of police reports and quiet nights at the community center. Clara felt lighter, as if she'd shed a weight she hadn't known she was carrying. But the scars of her mother's betrayal lingered, a dull ache that surfaced when she least expected it. She threw herself into her sketches, filling pages with images of hopes and rises over broken cities, hands reaching for the sky. Her art was her rebellion, her way of proving she was more than Ellen's rejection. Jamal was her anchor. He'd started working at a garage, his hands always smudged with grease, but his smile brighter than ever. "You're going to be famous one day," he told her, nodding at her sketchbook. "Those drawings, theory, something special." Clara laughed, brushing off the compliment. But his words planted a seed. Maybe her art could be more than a secret. Maybe it could be her future. Mrs. Larson noticed the change in Clara, too. One afternoon, she pulled her aside. "There's an art program at the community college," she said. "They're looking for talented kids like you. I think you should apply." Clara hesitated. School felt like a dream for someone else, someone who hadn't spent a year scraping by. But Mrs. Larson's faith in her was unwavering, and Clara found herself filling out the application, her hands trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. The program accepted her, and for the first time in years, Clara felt like she belonged somewhere. Her classes were a revelation, teachers who saw her potential, classmates who shared her passion. She poured her pain and hope into her work, creating pieces that told her story without words. One painting, A girl standing in a storm with a city rising behind her caught the eye of a local gallery owner. "This is raw," he said. "Real. You've got something to say." Clara's first exhibition was small, held in a corner of the gallery, but it felt like a triumph. Jamal was there, beaming like a proud brother. "Mrs. Larson," cried, her hands clasped over her heart. Strangers lingered over Clara's work, their faces thoughtful, and for the first time, Clara felt seen not as a runaway, not as a reject, but as an artist with a voice. But success didn't erase the past. Ellen's trial was approaching, and Clara was called to testify. The thought of facing her mother again made her stomach churn, but she knew she had to do it. Not for Ellen, but for herself. The courtroom was cold, the air heavy with tension. Ellen sat at the defendant's table, her face gaunt, her eyes avoiding Clara's. When Clara took the stand, she told the truth about the abandonment, the threats, the warehouse. Her voice didn't waver, though her hands shook. Ellen was convicted, sentenced to years behind bars. As the gavel fell, Clara felt no joy, only a quiet release. She'd spent so long carrying her mother's weight, but now she was free to let it go. Outside the courthouse, Jamal was waiting, his grin a beacon in the gray afternoon. "You did it," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You're free." Clara returned to her art with new purpose. Her paintings grew bolder, her colors brighter. She started volunteering at the community center, teaching art to kids who reminded her of herself, scared, but full of potential. She wanted them to know they were enough, that their stories mattered. Her own story was no longer one of rejection, but of resilience. One evening, as she and Jamal walked through the park, he stopped and turned to her. "You ever think about what revenge really means?" he asked. Clara paused, the question catching her off guard. She'd spent years hating Ellen, wanting to hurt her the way she'd been hurt. But now, standing in the fading light, she realized something. "It's not about hurting her," she said slowly. "It's about living better than she ever could." Jamal nodded, his eyes warm. "That's your revenge, Clara. You're building a life she can't touch." Clara smiled, her heart full. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. 2 years later, Clara stood in the center of a bustling gallery, her name on a placard by the door. Her latest exhibition, Unbroken, was a love letter to the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. The room hummed with voices, strangers admiring her work, their whispers a quiet validation of her journey. Her paintings told stories of loss and strength, of cities that burned and rose again. Each stroke was a piece of her heart, laid bare for the world to see. Jamal was there, his grease-stained hands swapped for a clean shirt, his grin as bright as ever. "Told you you'd be famous," he teased, nudging her shoulder. Clara laughed, her cheeks warm. She wasn't famous not yet, but she was known. Her art a beacon for others who'd been cast aside. Mrs. Larson stood nearby, chatting with a reporter, her pride in Clara evident in every word. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Clara had heard from Ellen once more, a letter from prison, a mix of apologies and accusations. Clara read it once, then burned it. She didn't need her mother's words to know who she was. She'd built a life from nothing, surrounded by people who saw her worth. That was enough. Her art program had led to a scholarship, then a mentorship with a renowned painter. Clara's days were filled with color and creation, her nights with laughter and plans. She and Jamal had moved into a small apartment, a place they'd made their own with mismatched furniture and walls covered in her sketches. They were family now, bound not by blood but by choice. One painting in the exhibition stood out, a portrait of a girl, her face half in shadow, half in light. It was Clara at 15, scared but unbroken, standing at the edge of a city that couldn't hold her. The plaque beneath it read, "To the girl who kept going." A young girl, no older than 12, stood before it, her eyes wide. "Is this you?" she asked, turning to Clara. Clara smiled, her heart full. "It was," she said. "But I'm more now." The girl nodded, as if she understood, and Clara saw a spark in her eyes, a spark she recognized. She handed the girl a sketchbook, one she'd brought for moments like this. "Keep drawing," she said. "Your story matters." As the night wound down, Clara stepped outside, the city air cool against her skin. Havenport was still rough, still unforgiving, but it was hers. She'd carved out a place in it, a life that was hers alone. The stars above were faint, drowned out by city lights, but Clara saw them anyway. They reminded her of the dreams she'd held on to, even when the world tried to take them away. Her revenge wasn't what she'd expected. It wasn't about Ellen's pain or suffering. It was about Clara's joy, her strength, her refusal to be defined by someone else's cruelty. She'd been rejected at 15, abandoned at 18, but she'd demanded more from life and she'd won. As she walked back inside, Jamal at her side, Clara felt a quiet certainty. The past would always be there, a shadow she couldn't erase. But it no longer held her. She was free, her heart open to the future, her hands ready to create. And in every stroke of her pencil, every splash of color, she told the world, "I am enough."